So here in 20.3, we look at Florentine art in the second half of the 15th century, learning to divide the early Renaissance into sub-periods, to start thinking in the first third of a century or the first half of a century and the second half. Um, I want you to focus particularly on the exploration of classical themes. They're calling this out here, the exploration of classical themes, and this is basically about humanism again. You will remember humanism is a central component of the Renaissance. It involves intense interest in and study of the classical Greek and Roman past. So we're partly thinking of it as a building and rebuilding of knowledge about the Greek and Roman cultural world and how that plays out in art. So if you scroll down past Verrocchio's David, we come to Pollaiuolo, very hard to say. And interestingly, it's basically a nickname, little chicken guy. What the authors have done here is to choose a sculpture that is a classical theme, a humanistic theme, Hercules and Antaeus. And I want you to really take in that this is a sculpture for the Medici and that they are as interested in, I'm trying to find here where they mention the Medici, there it is. The Medici are the patrons of Pollaiuolo in the 1460s, and their influence is seen here in Hercules and Antaeus because they are actually deeply involved in this rebuilding of knowledge of Greek and Roman ideas, mythology, art, and culture. And I want you to appreciate the contradiction. The Renaissance is very much about devotional Christian art. At the same time, it's about an art that is about a pagan worldview. So here's a painting, which is a Christian painting that has the Medici family shown. These are Medici family members. One of the most famous, Cosimo de' Medici here. They're riding to worship baby Jesus as the kings from the story of the Magi visiting the newborn baby. They're putting themselves in a Christian artwork, but they're just as interested in the story of Hercules. And there's a term they bring up here that I want to emphasize. They say some artists executed original designs all'antica, in the antique style, to appeal to a cultivated humanist taste. In other words, patrons like the Medici wanted artwork that looked like, by antique, the antique, all'antiqua, they mean the classical ancient world. One of the things that means is a tremendous new interest in the nude and in building knowledge about anatomy, because here you're looking at an ancient Greek bronze from around 450 BCE, and you can see that the mastery the Greeks achieved in anatomy is something that will inspire Renaissance artists. Look at the pecs, look at the rectus abdominis muscles, look at the biceps, look at how I can actually name muscles. Point to them on this statue, bones, the patella, the tibia. So we're going to see this influencing Renaissance art tremendously. And as you scroll down and read along, you will see that the textbook authors introduced this engraving, the Battle of the Nudes, to show you Pollaiuolo's interest in the naked body and its anatomy. So this isn't a engraving, it's a print, a reproducible artwork based on the technology of the intaglio metal plate that you learned about. In terms of anatomy, this is quite a study. As the textbook notes, it's not actually 100% accurate, as anyone who's studied anatomy can tell you. So for instance, there are these weird bulging muscles here on the side. It's probably meant to be what's called serratus anterius, but they're just too far forward and way too big. In general, the exaggerated bulges would make Arnold Schwarzenegger blush, right? I mean, these guys need to get tested for steroid abuse. But the point is that Pagliuolo is exaggerating musculature because he's interested in how the body works. He's starting to think anatomically in terms of the parts that make up the whole. Also, the point is that the human body, the male human body, that is being celebrated and studied. Nakedness here is meant to exalt the physical prowess of the male form. This is something that we would not have seen in the Christian-focused world of the Gothic or the medieval. This is very much showing us a change in the mindset that's based on humanistic study. And the authors make an important point here. He may have intended it as a compositional study of the human figure in action. In other words, it might have been a kind of a way of trying to know better and show better the human body in motion as a study tool. Notice how he's got this guy lunging. So he's studying how the weight pushes into the bending leg, and then the back leg is supporting that. And then that gets turned 180 degrees with this guy. So they're in the same pose, just turned in space. And you're going to see that a lot. This print may actually have been part of what we call the model book culture, which is what prints actually came to be used for. One of the interesting things about the powerful illusionism of art in the 15th century is that it was often based on actually studying what the original meaning of the word stereotype, which means a simplified image that you use to build images. Artists constructed what were called model books, which were drawings that they could use as the basis for building paintings or building other drawings. And some really good artists sold those to other artists. So an artist would learn to make eyes by practicing from a model book a certain type of eye, and then gradually learning how to add it to a face and then turn that face in space. And it's possible that this study of the nudes would have functioned that way, allowing an artist to learn how to build anatomically convincing nudes from various positions in space.